The new CEO didn't even look at me when she fired me. That was the part that stuck with me the most, not the arrogance, not the flimsy organizational restructuring excuse, not even the fact that she mispronounced my last name after 8 years. No. It was the way she waved her hand dismissively, eyes glued to her tablet, as if swatting away a fly. "Please turn in your badge on the way out," she said. "Security will escort you." If she'd bothered to look up, she might have noticed I wasn't surprised. Or worried. Or angry. Just waiting. Waiting for her to finish the little speech she clearly practiced in a mirror. She had no idea the ground was already shifting under her feet. 2 days earlier, I had become her boss's boss. When the board approached me about quietly acquiring shares from 3 retiring partners, I didn't think much of it. I'd been with the company long enough to know its pulse, and the founders trusted me to keep it steady as they stepped back. We'd signed the final documents 48 hours before this meeting, the kind of papers that make someone like me, who grew up worrying about overdraft fees, sit down for a long minute and just breathe. And now here she was, firing me from a company I partially owned. I let her talk. Every corporate cliché, new direction, performance review discrepancies, leadership cohesion. She didn't know any of my metrics. Didn't know the departments I rescued from chaos. Didn't know the people I mentored, the contracts I negotiated, the partnerships I rebuilt. She only knew I was someone hired under the old CEO, her favorite thing to burn. When she finally looked up at me with that self-satisfied smile, I reached into my pocket, not for my badge, but for an envelope. "For your records," I said, placing it on the table. Confusion flickered across her face. She opened the envelope, skimmed the first page, and went rigid. What is this?" she whispered. "It's the updated board roster," I replied calmly. "I'm sure you'll recognize the signatures. Especially the one naming me majority voting shareholder." Her tablet slipped from her hand. I leaned forward just slightly. "Now, about the termination, that's going to make the board meeting this afternoon very interesting. You'll be presenting your quarterly strategy, correct?" "Don't worry, I'll be there. Front row." Her pupils shrank as her brain connected the dots, the layoffs she proposed, the budgets she slashed, the directors she dismissed, the department heads she embarrassed on public calls. All the things she assumed no one above her was watching. But I had been watching. Her voice came out thin. "We can reverse the decision." "Of course." There must have been a misunderstanding. "There was," I said. "But it wasn't on my end." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and nodded toward the door. "Security will escort you to the boardroom. They're waiting." Her face drained of color. After all, she had requested security for this meeting. Just not for the person she expected. The conference room smelled like new paint and expensive perfume, the kind executives wear when they want to feel important. The new CEO, Alyssa Crane, sat at the head of the table like she'd been born there, legs crossed, nails tapping impatiently against a folder she clearly hadn't read. She didn't look at me when she said, "We're restructuring. Your position is eliminated effective immediately." It took everything in me not to laugh. 2 days. 2 days since the board quietly bought out the founders' remaining shares. 2 days since they handed controlling voting rights to me, the person who had kept this company alive through 6 CTOs, 3 recessions, and 1 cybersecurity meltdown. I hadn't planned for the timing to align like this, but sometimes life gifts you symmetry. I studied her for a moment, the gleaming confidence of someone who thought they won something. She had no idea she'd been hired by me. No idea what the next board meeting would look like. And absolutely no idea that firing me was the single biggest mistake she'd make in her 11-day career here. "I understand," I said calmly, sliding my badge across the table. Her eyes didn't even flick up. Of course they didn't. She just waved her hand dismissively, already turning to the next item on her agenda, like I was a coffee order she'd sent back. But the general counsel, Michael, noticed something she didn't: the badge's serial number. His face twitched, then drained. He mouthed "oh no" before standing up so fast his chair screeched. "Miss Crane," he said, voice breaking. "We need to." I said, "We're done here," she snapped, shooing him away with a flick. "He can finish the exit paperwork with HR." Michael looked at me helplessly, as if asking permission to continue. I gave him the faintest nod. Let her finish digging her hole. I took the folder she pushed toward me and walked out with the same calm you'd have leaving a boring lecture early. She believed she'd just asserted dominance. What she actually did was sign her own exit paperwork. I just hadn't filled in the date yet. The board meeting was in 19 hours. And she was about to learn that the man she'd fired wasn't simply redundant. He was her employer, her evaluator, her executioner, professionally speaking, of course. Effective immediately, she'd said. Oh yes. It would be. He didn't even shake my hand. The new CEO, 32, MBA from somewhere expensive, confidence inherited rather than earned, looked at me like I was a smudge on the corner of his spotless whiteboard. "Your department hasn't adapted to the new strategic direction," he said, already tapping his pen as if the conversation bored him. "So we're terminating your role effective today." I'd worked at the company for 19 years. I'd led the division that kept the entire operation solvent during 2 recessions, 1 merger, and a ransomware attack. But I didn't react. Not when he slid the severance envelope across the table, not when he tossed in a rehearsed "nothing personal," and certainly not when HR handed me the exit checklist like I was being dismissed from summer camp. Because 2 days ago, after the founder's sudden stroke, the board executed the contingency plan he'd written 14 years earlier, a plan with a single successor, me. And not a soul had told the new CEO. I left the conference room without a word. It was better this way. Let him enjoy his final hours as king of the cardboard castle. He strutted around the office after firing me, too, smiling, laughing with the same managers who used to tremble when they brought a budget over my desk. He even called an all-hands meeting for Monday, saying he had massive cultural realignment announcements. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because Monday at 9 a.m., he'd be sitting in front of the full board of directors, investors dialed in, cameras on, with no idea what was waiting for him. The board chair called me that evening. "You didn't push back when he fired you?" "No," I said. "It'll make the meeting more educational." He laughed the way only a man with millions in voting power can laugh. "See you Monday, Chief Executive Officer." The morning of the board meeting, the soon-to-be former CEO walked in wearing a custom navy suit and a smile big enough to qualify as delusional. He didn't even notice me sitting at the table with the board members. In his mind, I was probably an invited guest, or worse, someone they'd dragged in to witness my own firing more formally. When the board chair began, the CEO straightened proudly. "Before we begin," the chair said, "we'd like to formally recognize a change in company leadership. As of Friday, ownership transferred per the late founder's succession plan." The CEO glanced around, confused, lips parting. The chair continued, "Please welcome our new majority shareholder and chief executive officer." The CEO turned, expecting a handshake. He froze when he saw me standing. I didn't smile. "Good morning," I said calmly. "Before we address the agenda, we need to correct something. You fired me last week. That termination is void." The room went silent except for the faint hum of the conference speaker. "And as for your role," I added, sliding a folder toward him, "the board and I have agreed your employment ends effective immediately." His face drained so fast I wondered if I should call a medic. You can't," "This is outrageous," HR said. "I know what HR said," I replied. "They'll escort you out after the meeting." The board chair cleared his throat. "Shall we proceed?" The CEO's security badge dropped from his shaking hand and hit the table with a tiny, perfect clink. He was gone within 14 minutes. Afterward, the board asked if I wanted to reverse his decisions, but honestly, most of his ideas were bad enough that undoing them would only waste more time. Instead, I focused on what mattered: stabilizing the company, bringing back the people he'd mistreated, and restoring the culture the founder had built. And yes, the board meeting was fun. Very fun. He fired me before he even learned my name. That was the part that still made me laugh, quietly, bitterly, every time I replayed the moment. I'd been back in the building for less than 13 minutes when the new CEO, Tyler Grange, all of 32 and armed with a resume thinner than printer paper, dismissed me with a flick of his wrist. "Your position has been eliminated," he'd said, not looking up from his phone. 2 days earlier, I wouldn't have fought it. Hell, 2 days earlier, I might have welcomed the shove out of a company whose board had lost all strategic coherence. But 2 days earlier, everything had changed. 2 days earlier, I became the majority shareholder. I didn't tell him that, of course. I just watched him stumble through his speech, eyes darting from script to screen like he was trying to remember what came after "We appreciate your service." A speech he was reading, from a TikTok leadership coach. That part almost impressed me. Almost. He didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask what I did. Didn't ask why my badge said Executive Access, Founder Tier. He simply terminated me, slid a labeled envelope across the table, and walked out of the conference room to take a call about bottle service for a weekend trip to Miami. I stood there quietly for a moment, staring at the door he'd disappeared through. Then I smiled. The board meeting was tomorrow. Tyler strolled into the meeting with sunglasses on his head and an iced coffee in hand, greeting the directors like a frat boy arriving late to a recruitment dinner. "Ladies, gents," he said, clapping once. "Let's streamline today. I have a flight." He didn't notice me at first. Or maybe he assumed I was there to clear out the conference equipment. He only noticed when the chairman cleared his throat and said, "Before we begin, I believe congratulations are in order." Tyler smirked. "For me? I did close that India outsourcing deal yesterday, not for you," the chairman said. "For him." His hand lifted. Pointed. Landed directly on me. Tyler blinked, confused. "Huh? Why is he here?" "I fired him yesterday." Security said he cleared his desk. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered. The CFO folded her arms, biting her lip to keep from smiling. "I own 54% of the company now," I said calmly. The room went absolutely silent except for Tyler's iced coffee, which slipped from his hand, hit the table, and splashed across the polished wood. "You, what?" he whispered. "It's funny," I continued. "Your father and I built this place. He offered me shares over the years, shares I never sold. When the last 2 investors divested, I made them a fair offer. They accepted. Simple math." Tyler sank into a chair as if someone had cut his strings. No. That's not," someone would have told me. "Oh, they tried," the CFO said dryly. "You were in Cabo." The chairman cleared his throat again. "Based on recent performance, the board has decided to hold a vote of confidence regarding the CEO position." Tyler looked around the table desperately. No one met his eyes. "One moment," he said, springing to his feet. This guy was in operations. He's not leadership material. He's old school. Legacy. Obsolete. We need vision. Legacy, I repeated slowly. Interesting choice of words from a man whose greatest accomplishment is convincing a VC podcast to call him the next tech prodigy when we don't even make tech. Someone snorted, loudly. The vote failed for him in seconds. Tyler walked out of the boardroom pale and trembling, the same way he'd walked in yesterday, full of swagger and caffeine. I watched him go. I felt no anger. No satisfaction. Just closure. When the door shut behind him, the chairman turned to me. "Welcome back." I sat down at the head of the table, my table now, and adjusted the mic as I was saying. I began, opening the strategic roadmap I'd finished last night. "We have work to do." And for the first time in years, the room leaned forward to listen. I didn't even have time to sit down before she started her little performance. The new CEO, 32, MBA, and born with the kind of confidence that only trust funds can buy, looked at me like she was doing charity by making eye contact. She slid a termination packet across the conference table with one perfectly manicured finger, as if it might contaminate her. "Your role is redundant," she said. "Effective immediately. Security will escort you out once they arrive. Please don't make this uncomfortable." Uncomfortable? I almost laughed. 2 days ago, while she was busy redesigning the company logo and posting about disruptive visionary leadership, I was sitting in a closed-door meeting with the board finalizing their escape plan. They were tired of her impulsive decisions, tired of the money she burned, tired of the lawsuits she summoned like mosquitoes. And when they realized they needed someone with stability, someone who'd spent 28 years building this place, someone who actually understood the company, they made me an offer. I didn't leak it. I didn't brag about it. I didn't even tell my wife. The board's private equity partners bought out her father's remaining shares, and then quietly transferred controlling ownership to me. Not the CEO position, ownership. The job she thought she controlled? I could take it, or I could hand it to someone else. She had no idea. She kept droning on about organizational modernization and shifting energy alignment, the kind of corporate astrology nonsense she used to justify firing anyone who didn't worship her. I let her finish. Then I pushed the termination packet back toward her. "You might want to hold on to that," I said calmly. "You're going to need it in about an hour." She blinked, confused, annoyed. "I'm sorry." I checked my watch. "Your board meeting's at 10. You're still attending, right?" "Of course," she snapped. "Why wouldn't I?" I smiled, a slow, quiet smile that made her expression wobble. "No reason at all." And then I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked out before security even showed up. They tried to stop me in the lobby, but the moment they scanned my badge, the system flagged me as an executive-level owner. The guard literally stepped aside, apologized, and asked if I needed anything. I didn't. The board meeting would take care of everything. 10 o'clock arrived. She walked into the boardroom ready to celebrate my firing, armed with a binder full of PowerPoints and buzzwords. The directors were stone-faced. The private equity partners were already logged in. The chairwoman nodded at me as I entered and took the seat directly across from the CEO, my seat now. The look on her face was priceless. Confusion. Shock. Then a dawning horror. Why is he here?" she asked. The chairwoman folded her hands. "Because, as of 48 hours ago, he owns controlling interest in this company." Silence. Utter, perfect silence. Then the chairwoman added, "And as of this moment, your employment is terminated. Effective immediately." The termination packet she'd prepared for me was still in her hands. She looked down at it like it was an alien object. "Feel free to use the same wording," I said softly. The board didn't even hide their smirks. She was escorted out, politely, just as she'd wanted from me. And I sat back, opened my notebook, and cleared my throat to begin the meeting. "This is going to be fun," I said. The room agreed. I walked out of that conference room barely holding in the laughter, the kind that tightens your chest before it erupts. 2 days. That's all it had been since the board finalized the transition, quietly transferring controlling interest to me while the ink was still drying on the outgoing chairman's retirement papers. 2 days since I became, legally and contractually, the majority owner of the company this new CEO thought she had absolute dominion over. And she fired me. Not with dignity or process, but with that smug, dismissive tone people use on baristas when their latte is 2 degrees too cool. As I left the 17th floor, employees glanced at me with sympathy, confusion, and, among the ones who actually knew me, thinly veiled anger. Most of them had worked with me for a decade or more. They knew who had pulled the company out of the 2020 crash, who rebuilt the operations division from rubble, who had trained the very executives now pretending they didn't know my name. I kept my eyes forward. No point ruining the surprise. The real show would start soon. The boardroom was already full when I arrived for the afternoon meeting she had called, her meeting, the one she assumed she would lead. She stood at the head of the table, expensive suit pressed sharp enough to slice drywall, voice pitched with that artificial confidence executives practice in the mirror. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "This is a closed executive session," she said, waving a hand. "Only sitting officers and board members are allowed." I pulled out a chair anyway and sat. Calm. Silent. Dead center of the room. A few board members stiffened. A couple smiled knowingly. One cleared his throat to hide a laugh. She slammed her folder shut. "You can't be here. I terminated your employment at 10 a.m. HR processed it." "Correct," I said. "And irrelevant." Her jaw twitched. "Excuse me?" The chairman, well, former chairman, adjusted his glasses. "I think you should let him speak." "No," she snapped. "We need to address the financial discrepancies in Q3, and I will not. You're addressing them," I said, "to your employer." The words hit like a detonator. She blinked. Once. Twice. "What?" I opened the folder I had brought, mine, embossed, with the company seal. I slid the documents toward her with the same calm she had used when handing me my termination paperwork. Only these sheets were far more dangerous. 2 days ago, I said, the board transferred controlling ownership of the company to me. Effective immediately. Filed, notarized, and logged with the state. She stared at the documents. Then at me. Then back at the documents. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the AC, cold, sterile, perfect for dismembering an ego. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "Very," I replied. "So, to recap, this morning you fired the majority owner of the company without cause, in violation of your contract, in violation of corporate bylaws, and, most importantly, in violation of the continuity clause you signed during onboarding." A board member coughed to contain a grin. Another finally gave up hiding and smirked outright. She gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I didn't know, you didn't ask," I said. "You didn't check. You didn't read the ownership notices sent to all officers yesterday because you were too busy rehearsing your next motivational speech about leadership alignment." Her face darkened. "This is insane." "No," I said, leaning back, calm as a surgeon. "This is business." A board member cleared his throat. "Given the circumstances, we should proceed with the vote." Her eyes widened. "What vote?" "The vote," I said softly, "to remove you for gross negligence, policy violations, and endangering the operational stability of the company." The vote took 27 seconds. Unanimous. She stood there frozen, mouth parted in disbelief, as the security detail, my security detail, stepped in. I gathered my papers, adjusted my tie, and stepped to the head of the table, the seat she had so confidently taken for granted until 3 minutes ago. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "Let's begin." As they escorted her out, she finally found her voice. "You set me up." I shook my head. "No. You set yourself up. I just let gravity handle the rest." The door closed behind her, and for the first time in a week, the room felt steady, balanced, sane. The board members settled in. I opened the meeting. And yes, it was very fun.